Hi Booktube, Aaron here, hope you're doing okay. Today I'm going to be doing a tag video. Well, it's still just about Tuesday as I'm filming. And I'll do the ratings and review tag, which is a tag by Scott and Nell from Gunpowder Fiction and Plot. And I was tagged by Mark from Book Time with Elvis, so thank you Mark for the tag. If you want to watch either the original or Mark's video, then I'll have both down in the description for you. And the first prompt here for this tag is to tag some folks. I don't have anyone particularly in mind, but I'll throw it open to anyone who hasn't done it yet, anyone who hasn't been tagged or has been tagged and just hasn't got around to it yet. Yeah, please feel free to do this tag if you want to. And it's a really interesting tag actually, so yeah, maybe give it a go if you're wondering which tag to do next and you're not sure. This might be a good one. So the first question proper is, how do you know you've just finished a good book? Is it a thinking or feeling response? And for me, it's kind of more of a feeling response for me. But I try not to separate it too much because maybe sometimes the more I think about a book, can actually deepen my emotive response to it. So even though it is maybe mainly a feeling response, there's still a lot of thinking going on there in the background. Yeah, there tends to be just this gut reaction generally once I've finished a good book. Then next up is, when do you begin to form your review or rating? Is it like, or what's the first question that you ask yourself? And I tend to start forming my feelings about the book, or start reflecting on my feelings about the book when I'm partway through, somewhere around the halfway point, but not always. And then the fun thing with that is that there's enough room left in the book for my feelings to change. I can prove myself wrong. There's still that element of surprise there. Yeah, I always think it's quite good just to have a spot partway through, just to reflect a bit about what I've read so far, and it tends to help me then when I get to the end and I can sort of compare and contrast. I tend to ask myself questions like, what is this book trying to do, and maybe what are the themes or feelings or images that it's trying to convey to me, and then is it doing this powerfully or convincingly, and they tend to help me in forming my feelings. Yeah, that's generally how it goes. And next up is, do you use star ratings? And yes, I do. And then there are two sort of sub questions to this. So the first is, explain your star rating system. What does a good book get in your rating system? And my star rating system is pretty experience based. I don't think about it too much. I tend to finish the book, and then at some point after finishing, I get up Goodreads on my phone, and it'll just be the star that my finger gravitates to. I can't really explain it more than that. Maybe generally, if I was to look back and see how it works, books that I've really enjoyed, or books I've just enjoyed generally, will get at least 3 stars, and then a book I really enjoy gets 4, and then it really has to probably knock my socks off to get 5. But then I can maybe feel quite even fonder about a 4-star book months and months after I've read it, and I look back and I wonder why I didn't give it 5 stars. But that's just the way it goes. But then there's 2 and 1 star for books that maybe I didn't like too much, or the experience wasn't that great, but there still might be some redemptive qualities too. So that's sort of the star rating system, but again, I don't really think about it. And then part 2 kind of comes into this: is your star rating consistent? So are all your stars and books, wait, what is that? I got it. So are your 4-star books better than your 5-star books? Possibly. I don't really know. Again, I just follow my finger. I just see where the finger goes. And then let's see. I also get a lot of 4-star books. I think most of my ratings on Goodreads tend to be 4 stars for some reason. I don't know why. That's just what happens. Number 5 is, do you believe every book has its perfect owner? Does this contradict the idea that a book can be bad? I do like to think that every book does have a perfect reader somewhere, but I don't think it necessarily contradicts the idea that a book is good or bad, because I'll get into it a bit later, but essentially I think a bad book is a book that just doesn't meet its own criteria, but there are still people that might see very clearly that a book doesn't live up to its own standard and still love it anyway. I think that there doesn't need to be that contradiction there. There can still be a book that is bad and it still have a perfect reader. That's totally possible, I think. Then number 6, what book that you hated have you recommended? I don't think I've ever recommended a book I hated. I don't like to say that I've hated a book. There aren't many books I've read that I could say I hate, which is fortunate, I guess. Maybe I'm just a bit too optimistic with the books I read. I don't know. Number 7. This is a fun one. So, what makes a book good, bad, or great by your evaluation? So I was talking about this earlier. It tends to be whether a book is doing what it set out to do and whether it's met or exceeded expectations. So that's a good book or a great book. And so a bad book is a book that doesn't do this. It doesn't have to meet all of its criteria if it has criteria. But it's just sort of generally, is it a book that's really striving to meet its aims and the expectations of the reader. And sometimes the expectations can be unjust. Sometimes the expectations might have you looking in the wrong direction, but then the direction the book takes, it takes you by surprise, and it's great. And so there's always little things to beware there, but generally that's what I think. But then with a great book as well, one thing I've noticed is that a great book can be like a place that you've visited and you still kind of remember, it can still feel. And I was thinking about this with The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway, which isn't my favourite Hemingway book, but might be the greatest of his novels. Maybe simply just because of the way that he really portrays these settings, these places, and they've really lived on in my memory. I was just listening to a podcast a few days ago, and they just kind of offhandedly mentioned The Sun Also Rises and the fishing trip that happens in it, and just immediately the scenery and the feeling of that section came back, and then other moments, other scenes in the book were coming back, and it's just an amazing place to be. This book, it has its own sort of psychogeography, which kind of leads us into the another book that does this really well is The Rings of Saturn, at least for me, by W.G. Sebald. And again, I couldn't quote lines and lines out of this book. It's very, it's a hard book for me to really say what it's about, but it's a book that comes back to me a lot, and I can sort of live in for a while, even if I'm not reading it at the time. So at least for me, that's part of what makes a really great book. And I think that's everything I wanted to say with that one. So I'll move on to the next one. So when evaluating the quality of a book, do you have a specific criteria or certain aspects of the book, such as character development, that you consider? And does this change if you're writing an in-depth review versus just thinking about the book for enjoyment? And I think for me, it really depends on what elements of the book or what sort of concerns the book has. So if it's a book that's trying to be like a family saga, I am going to be looking for a certain amount of character development and a kind of fullness to the characters, even if I'm not a particularly character-driven reader. I still have a certain amount of expectation. So yeah, it depends on what the book, just by the kind of book it is and what you'd expect that kind of book to put forward. Number 9, do you consider star ratings or average ratings when choosing books to read or add to your TBR? No, that's not really the way I think about it. I maybe go off more recommendations or just general things I've heard through the grapevine about the book, or I just go with my gut reaction. But yeah, I never really scroll through Goodreads. I don't really use Goodreads as a way to find books to read. I think of it more of a way to, one, to catalogue my own reading, and also just to be really nosy and see what other people are reading. Yeah, I don't really use star ratings in that way. Then number 10, who on Booktube does reviews of books that you know you can use to decide if a book is good or not, and what makes their review so good? So I've always really, I say always, since watching Booktube, I've really enjoyed Matthew from Maybe Book Club. Just the way he talks about books, it's really earnest, and it just really makes me want to pick up the book. It helps that a lot of the books he talks about are books that I want to read or have read, so that's always good. So some others then, there's, I can actually give you an example of around the time I started making Booktube videos, maybe a little bit before. I was, I think, watching videos where Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading was talking about Bleak House a lot, and just hearing her talk about Bleak House really made me want to pick it up, and so I did, and I read it and I loved it. So there's a direct example for you. And then like 2 books I haven't read yet, but I have a feeling I'm going to enjoy. So they're kind of on my shelves. There's the Good Soldier Svek by Yaroslav Hasek, which was recommended by Mark by Booktime with Elvis. And I asked him, what would be like maybe 3 like landmark Czech books for me to read, and this was one of them. And so, I trust his opinion. I've joined in some of his sort of read-alongs and things, so I have a rough kind of feeling about what he likes and whether certain elements of my taste line up to his reading. So there's an example. I've also got Civilizations by Laurent Binet here as well, and I know he likes Laurent Binet. And I'm going to be reading this soon, and so I'm hoping I'm going to enjoy it, since this is an author that Mark from Booktime with Elvis has liked. So there are just a few examples of booktubers that I trust. There are loads more, but I don't want to ramble on for too long. Okay, and then number 11 is, do these booktubers use different language to evaluate and review the overall quality of the book? Yeah, I think they do. I couldn't really give you an analysis of each one of those booktubers off the top of my head, but that's part of what I love about Booktube, is that everybody thinks and talks about books so differently, and that just gives you, at least for me, it gives me a deeper, more multicoloured picture of how you can read these books and the effect these books can have on your life. And so it's great to hear someone who speaks slightly different, explains things slightly differently, and then go over to someone else, and that, particularly if they're talking about the same book. For me, it's just deeper and more fun to hear more people talking about it. So that's pretty much all I can say about that. Sorry. I think that's it. That's the end. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. As I said, if you want to do this tag, please do. yeah, I guess I'll see you in another video soon. In the meantime, take care and have a lovely day. All right, bye bye.